It's great to welcome back to the program today Don Lemon, host of The Don Lemon Show and also author of the new book, I Once Was Lost, My Search for God in America. You know, Don, my audience knows I am not a particularly religious guy. You know, I say I'm culturally Jewish, I'm culinarily Jewish, etc. But I have a real respect for the evolutionary value of religion at different times in the history of Homo sapiens. And I still think, especially having visited lots of rural and more conservative parts of the country, that it's not this objectively negative thing that the left should reject and say this is necessarily a problem for our politics. I know lots of progressive Christians, etc. I'm kind of curious where you are now in seeing the last however many years of Christianity to a degree being weaponized by the right wing and how that fits kind of into your beliefs.
Well, that's really why I wrote the book. One of the main reasons is because I saw how religion, especially evangelicals, right? How they were they've been injecting religion into our politics. And I thought that that was pushing us further away from God and further away from democracy. Because as you know, David, we're supposed to have a separation of church and state. And so I am a faithful person. Part of the thing that sparked me writing this book was a crisis of faith that I had that we can talk about. But I don't push my religious beliefs onto anyone else. And I don't wear my religion on my sleeve like many people do, a sort of virtue signaling about how I feel and what you should be doing and judging people based upon my religious beliefs. Number one, it's no one else's business but my own. And number two, isn't that why we left England, is to have, freedom of religion and whether we wanted to believe or not believe?
Yeah, I want to hear about the crisis. And just as a sort of anecdote, I have friends who are progressive Christians,
Mhm.
and they don't really talk to me about their religion, but I know that to them it's important. And there are sometimes they will say to me things like, we've experienced miracles. And we know that was God acting. I'm searching for the right language to even explain these things. That we know that was God's action, and we've experienced miracles. And there's some, I think, on the progressive left who would say that's too kooky, and like we don't want that in our movement at all. But when I look at a lot of these progressive Christians, they support a woman's right to bodily autonomy. They agree with me when it comes to social issues. They agree with me on economic issues. It seems a mistake to reject that piece of the electorate when they do seem to be allied electorally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. And look, there are extremes and people can have their own beliefs, right? If you want to believe in miracles, then that is your thing. But don't force me to believe in miracles just because you do. And so, look, I always say that am faithful, David, but I'm not like a churchy person. I had enough of church as a kid because I was raised Baptist. So on Sundays, I'd have to go to the service in the morning, the service in the evening, and sometimes Bible study in between. And then I went to a Catholic school. So then there was catechism, and I had to go to mass on Fridays, whatever. So again, I'm not pushing my religious beliefs. The book is, um, it was supposed to be a coda to my previous book that I had. This is the Fire, when I talked about racism and George Floyd and what was happening during the pandemic. And so this is just I want people to be aware. I wanted people to be aware of just how dangerous it is with these toxic evangelical teachings and how they're, again, infecting our politics, and they're not only trying to blur the line, right, between church and state, they're trying to erase the line between church and state and basically push us into a theocracy. And that's not what America is all about. The book is actually probably more political than it is religious. I just take religious teachings, toxic evangelical teachings, to try to show people the hypocrisy of pushing America towards a theocracy. That's it.
There are a lot of different views as to why the United States is becoming less religious over time. You have your, as science knows more, there's less need for religion perspective. There are so many different things with which to fill our time that church gets pushed out sort of perspective. It was because prayer was banned in schools that kids aren't getting into religion to begin with, although I kind of question that one. What's your view as to the decline in religiosity in the United States?
I talk about that in the book a lot. And I think, again, it's because of the hypocrisy. It's because people use religious teachings and doctrines. And I'm talking about Christianity here because I'm a Christian, and someone of a different faith may have feel differently about it.
Yeah.
But I think someone of a different faith needs to read this book. And I think especially Christians need to read this book, because then they'll realize, like, what if they were trying, my home state of Louisiana, they're trying to put the 10 Commandments in schools. Now, what if someone did that, as it relates to Islam, right? Or to Judaism? Would they feel the same way about it? And so I think that people are being turned off by religion because they see the hypocrisy, and they see that the control that especially evangelicals are trying to have over society by forcing their religious beliefs onto people, even people who atheists, people who don't believe in religion, or people who believe in who have other faiths, and they're trying to push that. But just trying to push it into our politics, we should not be establishing laws, David, in America based on religious beliefs or religious doctrines of any, religious background. And I think people see that, and it's pushing them, as I said, this push towards theocracy is pushing us away from God, if you believe in God, and it's pushing us away from democracy.
There was a period of time during the 2016 Republican primary where evangelical Christians seemed to correctly identify that they didn't have much in common with Donald Trump. And many of them were initially supporting Ted Cruz and some other candidates. But ultimately, evangelical Christians in 2016 and also in 2020 did choose Trump over the Democratic candidates, Hillary Clinton in 2016 and Joe Biden in 2020. What ultimately explains that, given what seems to be such an inconsistency in beliefs?
I'm glad you asked that question. Power, rationalization. Remember, Donald Trump we're not electing a pastor in chief or whatever they say, we're electing a president. Donald Trump, God uses, people, imperfect people, and all that. It is the interpretation of doctrine the way that you want to interpret it. If you look at that, this is the same sort of people who used those same doctrines in the Bible and the same rationalizations to subjectify women, right? Or subjugate women, excuse me, or to enslave African Americans, or to marginalize members of the LGBTQ community. It's all in the interpretation of the religious doctrine, which leads me back to your previous question. Why are we seeing this decline in religious belief? It's because of that. It's because people see the hypocrisy and sort of the ridiculousness of it when you use it just because you want to have influence. So you say, well, I'm going to interpret this sort of this way. I'm going to look at it this way. So it's whatever it is that you can do to get people to believe and to be on your side, you'll do it. And that's the ridiculousness of it. What did Bill Maher call it? Religiosity? Yeah. That's ridiculous.
It seems that there's an analogy to be made. I don't know if you remember. Honestly, I think it's been said by many people, but there's this idea that the Democratic Party has sort of like re-enslaved Black Americans by assuming their votes or something along those lines. This idea that's kind of floating.
On the plantation.
Back on the plantation. Yeah. It seems that if you want to talk about that, there's been sort of an effective version of that with evangelical Christians and the Republican Party, in the sense that some assumed dislike of Democratic candidates has to be a factor to a degree where voters end up saying, hey, you know what? Even though Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden are probably way closer to my actual religious beliefs than Donald Trump, I'm not voting for them. They're Democrats. I'm voting for the Republicans. It seems there's a version of that happening.
Well, that's when you make politics a religion, just like we've made in America guns a religion, right? So that's for folks who have made politics a religion. And those are excuses, really. Like, it's the same excuse. I think that's an excuse like now when people say, I'm undecided.
Oh, yeah.
For me, undecided means like, I want to find a reason to vote for Donald Trump, right? That's what undecided is. And I'm waiting for him or Kamala Harris or someone to give me an excuse to vote for Donald Trump. So it's the same thing. I need a reason not to support Democrats. By the way, if you believe in Jesus and just about every other religious deity or religious figure from ages ago, they're all they're all progressives. They would all be Democrats in this time. They would all be trying to help immigrants, help the poor, get health care to people. All of these things that people deem to be progressive issues are really, so it seemed to be religious issues. So for me, all of that is an excuse for me to be selfish, to say that I don't, I want to have a tax break because I have a lot of money. I want to be able to control what women do with their bodies. All of that seems to be an excuse for them to just be bigots and to be super partisan and super to the right. That's what that means to me.
I want to talk a little bit about the state of the presidential race.
Of course.
We are now 5.5, 6 weeks out, something like that. We were talking before the interview a little bit about the confusing signal in some of the polling. I've told my audience, listen, here's one story where things look very good for Kamala Harris. And that story is that the national polling, she now is leading by more than 2. It's approaching 2.5. We could even get closer to 3. The momentum, the fundraising, the crosstabs with Asian voters, women voters. Okay, that's all looking very good for her. On the other hand, if we just go state by state, right now, it seems Trump is leading in Arizona, which he lost in 2020. It seems Trump is leading in Georgia, which he lost in 2020. And depending on where you look, he may even be leading in Pennsylvania. That's a very different picture. If you put it all together, it kind of seems like a 2-point popular vote win for Kamala Harris, with Trump still eking out 270 in the Electoral College, is certainly plausible. I don't know that I'd call it likely, but it certainly seems plausible. Where do you see it?
Well, when I look at the popular vote, I kind of ignore it, David, because the popular vote does not elect presidents. Right? I mean, we're basically minority rule in this country because of the Electoral College. And so the only way I look at the popular vote is if someone is way ahead in the popular vote, and that sort of gives you an indication of what's happening in battleground states and in swing states. But those 3 states that you mentioned, you said Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, if that goes into the Republican column, Vice President Kamala Harris is in trouble.
Yep.
Right? And so what's shocking to me, and one of the reasons I wrote this book, is that when you look at all of Donald Trump's indiscretions, all of the 34 criminal counts, all of the being, found liable for sexually assaulting a woman, which the judge says is akin to rape. All of those things, right? The cheating on the wife, all of that. And you still have 80% or 83%, I believe, of evangelicals who are going to support him, and Christians and people who, don't like LGBTQ community and all of those things. So I am shocked, honestly, that the polls are this close. And it's a bit frightening that they are this close, so close to the election, and that people are saying that they are undecided at this point. What is there to decide about?
Yeah, that's confusing to me. I mean, you didn't you speak to some of these folks when you did your road trip to the DNC and you spoke to all sorts of people?
Yeah.
Did you happened across some supposedly undecided people, right?
Undecided people and people who just flat out said that they're supporting Donald Trump. Unlikely demographics that you would think. So I believe, David, just from going out and speaking to people, right? Because I like to be my own sort of unscientific, poll or focus group person. So I go out and I talk to people. And I shouldn't say that I was shocked by it, because being in this business for so long, I'm never surprised by who people are going to say they're going to vote for. And just quite frankly, how uninformed they are sometimes, even with all the information that we have out there, right? So I believe that there's a hidden vote for Donald Trump among Black men, maybe not so hidden anymore. I believe that there is a hidden vote for Donald Trump among young people, especially college students, white males on college campuses. And I believe there's a hidden vote for Donald Trump among women as well, because, they think they tend to romanticize the past, and they say, oh, things were great and better under Donald Trump. And they forget when they talk about groceries are, prices are up, which is true, they're coming down. But at least there are groceries on the shelves, because there's not someone who handled the pandemic poorly and contributed to inflation and higher prices and all of those things. So I don't think that these people normally show up in polls or focus groups. So if that should be a wake-up call, I believe, to Democrats.
And so these are not reluctant Trump voters. These are just Trump voters that don't want to admit publicly that that's what they are.
Well, I think some of them are reluctant Trump voters and some of them are very adamant about it. But when you think of generally African Americans, especially men, you would think, okay, they're going to support the black woman. Not necessarily so.
Mm.
Or that Donald Trump has said and done so many racist things that they wouldn't support him. Or even women in general. And you think about, the whole E. Jean Carroll of it all and all of that stuff. You would think, and women's reproductive rights, you would think. But I heard person after person after person saying, hey, look, and here's the thing. I don't think that those folks would say that to any sort of generic pollster or focus group person. Almost to a person, those people say, hey, Don Lemon. And I would go, hey, how are you? Oh my God, I can't believe that you're out here. And so I would ask them a question. They would say, okay, well, I don't normally say this, but I'll tell you, Don, because they feel like they know me from being in their living rooms for 16 years. So I just think that they are being candid about their votes, and they're not necessarily candid and honest about it with focus groups or pollsters, even if they pick up the phone for those folks, because most people have cell phones now. A lot of those are done on landlines.
Hey, last thing I wanted to ask you about, aside from who will win, which if you have a prediction, fine, but it's sort of like it'll probably be close. I have no idea who's going to win. I have a different question, which is, when do you think we will know who the winner is?
I don't think we will know the night of. And I think it will be some time. If you look at, David, you've been covering this, what's happening in Georgia and the folks who've sort of infiltrated the local election process in Georgia, and they get to decide who can certify, whether the state can certify, or then, federally, if the election can be certified. Those people will hold off for as long as they can, and they'll try to figure out some way to maneuver the election in their state towards Donald Trump. And so that's happening in Georgia, and it's happening in a number of other states. So I think Donald Trump is going to contest it if Kamala Harris wins. The win for Kamala Harris, in order for us to know soon after the election, I don't mean the night of, but just within days, it will have to be a big win or a landslide. And going into this right now, if you believe the polling, snapshot in time, that is not going to happen. But I think we will be surprised on election night. I do believe that there could be a big win for the vice president, even with all of those, that secret vote that I talk about.
And you think that we may start to get that picture on election night, even if we don't have final results?
I think we'll start to get the picture, but even if we don't get final results, and even if it is a win for the vice president, we all believe it, it's going to take a while for those people to concede. And remember, when they did the whole thing where I forget what they called the group of people who went in and they had to count the votes over and over and over again. There's some sort of team that they call it. I forget what they called it.
Yeah, I don't remember if it was the forensic audit or the
yeah. So
that could very much take a while.
Again. This is good. This is beyond hanging chads.
Yeah.
Beyond, if you will, can you just get me 11,000, whatever, 800 or whatever votes? This is going to be beyond that this time.
All right. We've been speaking with Don Lemon. The book is I Once Was Lost, My Search for God in America. Don, great having you on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, David. It's always a pleasure. Good to see you. And I hope to see you on my show sometime soon.